Welcome, curious minds, to the deep dive. Today, we're taking a monumental plunge right down into the atomic realm.
We're exploring a molecular mystery.
Exactly, a mystery that holds the key to revolutionizing how we design, well, pretty much everything. From the next generation of life-saving drugs to those super-efficient batteries we need for the future.
So get ready to have your mind, and maybe your molecules, truly blown.
Imagine for a moment you're a chemist, a brilliant one, trying to engineer some breakthrough material.
Gave you a new catalyst.
Yeah.
Cleaner fuel.
Or maybe a superconductive polymer for, flexible electronics.
Right.
At the core of every single thing, at the most fundamental level, you've got molecules. And even tinier, they're electrons.
And these electrons aren't just sitting there. They're dynamic, constantly moving, interacting.
Understanding exactly how they behave within a molecule, that's what scientists call its electronic structure. And that is the ultimate secret sauce.
It really is. It's the master key. It unlocks all of a molecule's properties.
Like how it reacts, how it absorbs light.
How it conducts electricity, even its color or smell, everything.
But here's the catch, and it's a monumental one. Accurately calculating these electron behaviors, this electronic structure.
Yeah.
It's incredibly complex.
And computationally slow. Painfully slow sometimes.
Yeah, it's been one of the biggest bottlenecks in chemistry and material science for, well, decades.
That's precisely right. For a long time, the gold standard in quantum chemistry calculations, it's a method with a bit of a mouthful of a name.
Yeah, get ready for it.
Coupled cluster singles and doubles with perturbative triples, or CCSDT for short.
Thank goodness for the acronym.
Definitely. And CCSDT has been our go-to for really unparalleled precision. Think of it like a GPS system that can pinpoint every electron's location and interaction down to the nanometer level.
Wow.
It gives us incredibly detailed, high-fidelity insights into a molecule's true nature.
And it is truly amazing in its accuracy. But that very precision, as you said, has also been its Achilles heel. It's a massive bottleneck.
It is.
You used the analogy before. It's like trying to build a gleaming, futuristic skyscraper brick by meticulous brick. But you're only allowed to use a hand shovel.
Right. You can do it. And you can be incredibly precise with each shovelful of dirt for the foundation.
Sure.
But for anything larger than, say, a backyard shed, it just takes forever. CCSDT has this feel.
Well, the technical term is an unfavorable scaling relationship with system size.
Okay, let's break that down. What does unfavorable scaling actually mean for our listener?
Well, to put that in plain English for you, it means if you try to calculate a molecule that's just a little bit bigger,
Yeah.
the computational cost doesn't just go up a bit, it explodes dramatically.
Explodes. How much?
We're talking n to the 7th scaling. N is the number of electrons.
N to the 7. Okay, give me a picture for that.
Okay, imagine if adding just one more person to a team didn't just add a little more work,
Right.
but made the entire project 128 times harder for everyone involved.
Whoa. Okay, that's unusable for big things.
Uh-huh.
That's the kind of computational nightmare we're talking about with CCSDT. So while it's fantastic for accuracy, it can only realistically handle small molecules.
Yeah.
Usually those with up to maybe a few hundred electrons.
So that incredible precision is invaluable. But for most real-world stuff, bigger molecules, complex systems.
Simply not practical. Not with our current computers, anyway.
So we're left with this big molecular mystery.
Yeah.
How do we get that gold standard CCSD accuracy for predicting what molecules will do, but get it at lightning fast speed? How do we upgrade from that hand shovel to like a super-powered excavator for designing molecules?
Yeah, how do we bridge that gap?
And that's the very mystery we're diving into today. Because here's the truly fascinating part. A brilliant team, a collaboration, actually.
From MIT, Emory University, and Honda Research Institute.
Right. They've just made this unexpected discovery. They've essentially taught a machine learning model to think like those super advanced quantum chemistry calculations.
They're pretty amazing stuff.
They've created what we can really call, and it's a fitting title for our deep dive, the neural network of molecules.
I like it.
So get ready for some serious chemistry insights that are anything but elementary.
Okay, let's really unpack this aha moment because it's genuinely groundbreaking.
It really is.
At the very heart of all this is that fundamental concept, electron behavior.
Yeah.
Why does it matter so much where electrons are and how they move?
Well, because a molecule's electronic structure, where its electrons hang out, how they zip around, how they interact with each other with external forces,
Yeah.
that determines everything about the molecule.
Everything. Like what?
Its reactivity, its optical properties, how well it conducts electricity, its very identity. If you can accurately predict this electronic structure,
Then you can predict its whole personality, its potential.
pretty much, yeah, you can
Yeah.
predict its behavior and its potential applications.
Okay. And for years, we've had, you said, two main ways to try and predict this. Primarily, yes, two main computational approaches. The first, and the most widely used, is density functional theory, or DFT.
Right, DFT. I've heard of that one.
And then there's the one we just discussed, the gold standard, coupled cluster singles and doubles with perturbative triples, CCSDT.
So DFT is kind of the workhorse, right? Used a lot, relatively fast.
Exactly. It's widely used across the scientific community. It's relatively fast.
I like to think of it as maybe a really good, solid roadmap. It gets you most of the way there. Super useful for a quick overview.
That's a good analogy.
Yeah.
But like you said, it's not perfect. DFT has some inherent systematic errors, meaning it's not perfectly precise. Like that map might be off by a few feet here and there. It can lead you slightly astray if you need absolute pinpoint accuracy.
Okay, and here's the critical part for machine learning, right? A lot of the existing ML models in chemistry were trained on DFT data.
That's a key point, yes.
Yeah.
Many current models are trained using data generated by DFT, which means, well, no matter how clever your machine learning model is.
Its accuracy is capped, limited by DFT's own errors.
Precisely. You can't get gold standard predictions if your training data is only, let's say, silver standard.
Got it. You're limited by your ingredients.
Exactly. And that's where CCSDT truly earns its gold standard reputation. It's incredibly accurate. It provides really high fidelity predictions for a huge range of molecular properties.
So sticking with the map analogy, if DFT is the good roadmap.
But CCSDT is like a GPS with centimeter level precision. It tells you exactly where everything is, down to the smallest detail. It gives you an unparalleled understanding of that molecular landscape.
Okay, so if CCSDT is so wonderfully accurate, the question burning in my mind, and probably yours too, listener, is why aren't we just using that all the time? What's the catch?
The catch, as we touched on, is that prohibitive computational cost.
Right, the n⁻⁷ scaling nightmare.
Exactly. For every extra electron, the calculation time just skyrockets. It becomes practically impossible to run these calculations for anything but the smallest molecules, maybe up to a few hundred electrons.
Anything larger, and you'd need centuries on a supercomputer.
Pretty much, yeah. For many interesting systems, it's just computationally out of reach.
So we're stuck in this dilemma. Super precise, but super slow. Or faster, but not quite precise enough.
That's the trade-off chemists have faced for a long time.
And here's where it got even trickier for these scientists, right? Because CCSDT, the gold standard, doesn't even produce data in a format that older ML models could easily use.
That's another crucial challenge they had to overcome. CCSDT doesn't give you a simple, single configurational representation like DFT does, which is sort of a straightforward way to describe where the electrons are.
Why not?
It's because of its complex, many-body quantum entanglement nature.
Okay, entanglement. That sounds complicated.
Think of it this way. Electrons aren't just independent particles moving around on their own. They're more like a group of highly interconnected dancers on a stage.
Okay.
Every dancer's movement is intricately linked to every other dancer's movement. They affect and are affected by the whole group.
Like a very complex choreography.
Exactly. Describing that complex, interconnected, synchronized, ever-changing dance of all the electrons at once. That's what CCSDT does. But it's incredibly hard to capture that entire dynamic, entangled picture in a simple static snapshot that a computer can easily learn from.
So you couldn't just feed raw CCSDT data into the old ML models and hope for the best?
Nope. It was like having the most exquisite ingredients, but no recipe that knew how to combine them in a way the machine could understand.
And that, my friend, was the scientists' mission impossible. They set out to do what seemed almost contradictory.
Combine the high accuracy of CCSDT
with the low computational cost of machine learning.
Their ambitious goal was a unified multitask ML method for molecular electronic structures, something that went beyond just predicting one thing, like energy.
They wanted it to capture a whole suite of properties, like a master key for how molecules behave.
Precisely.
Okay, this is where our hero enters the story. The Equivariant Graph Neural Network, or EGN.
The EGNN.
Now, equivariant sounds a bit technical, but the idea behind it is actually pretty elegant, isn't it?
It is. Imagine a molecule just floating in 3D space. if you pick it up and rotate it or move it.
Its physical properties don't change, right? It's still the same molecule doing the same thing.
Exactly. An equivariant graph neural network inherently respects this symmetry. It understands this.
How so?
If you feed it a molecule and then you feed it the same molecule but rotated, the network's predictions will also be rotated in exactly the same way. But the underlying physical properties it predicts, like energy, remain constant.
So it understands 3D space and symmetry automatically.
That understanding is baked into its architecture, which makes it incredibly robust and powerful for handling molecular data. It's a huge advantage.
Okay, so let's break down how this EGNN actually works. Looking at their paper, like Figure 1A, it starts with an input layer.
Right, the green blocks in their diagram. The EGNN doesn't start from scratch. It takes an atomic configuration as input.
Which is just
Basically, where each atom is its 3D coordinates and what kind of atom it is its atomic number. Carbon, hydrogen, etc.
And from that, it builds a map.
It constructs a molecular graph. Atoms are the nodes, and the bonds connecting them are the edges. This graph is the basic structure map.
Okay, a detailed symmetrical map. But here's where it gets really clever, right? It doesn't calculate everything from the ground up.
No, that would be too slow. It starts with a smart shortcut. It uses a fast-to-evaluate single configurational method, something like a quick local DFT calculation. This gives it a low accuracy, but very fast, effective Hamiltonian, which they call F prime. F.
So like a rough sketch of the molecular landscape. Not perfect, but a quick start.
Exactly. It saves immense computational time.
And this is where the machine learning magic happens, the correction.
This is the ingenious core of their breakthrough. The EGNN then acts as a correction term, which they label V theta.
V theta, okay. And this correction term is the genius part because
Because it's what precisely captures those tricky, non-local exchange correlation effects, the things crucial for getting that gold standard accuracy.
Ah, yes, those subtle long-range influences we talked about, like knowing how a storm far away affects the local weather.
That's a good way to think about it. Those complex, interconnected long-range electron interactions that faster methods usually miss. The EGNN learns how to account for those.
It learns V theta through training.
Exactly. The brilliance is that the EGNN learns this V theta. It learns how to add the crucial missing details to that rough initial sketch, F prime, to transform it into something incredibly accurate.
Okay, so how does it learn? What's the brain of this EGNN?
That would be the convolutional layer, shown in blue in Figure 1A, and detailed more in 1B. This is where the real processing happens.
Graph convolution.
Yes. It processes the atom and bond information through multiple layers of this graph convolution. It takes the initial basic features and transforms them into richer, more nuanced node features for atoms and edge features for bonds.
So it gets a deeper understanding.
It allows the network to deeply understand the molecular environment, the context of each atom, how different parts of the molecule relate. It's like a detective piecing together more and more complex clues about the molecule's inner workings.
Fascinating. And then the output layer, the orange blocks.
Once the EGNN has processed all this information, the output layer generates the pieces needed to build that V theta correction matrix.
And when you add V theta to the initial rough sketch, F prime,
You get the total effective Hamiltonian, HF. This is the refined, high-accuracy electronic structure incorporating all those complex interactions the EGNN has learned to master.
And here's the really crucial bit for practical use, the multitasking superpower. From this one single accurate HAF, it's not just a one-trick pony.
Not at all. From that single HF, the model can then calculate a whole series of ground state properties using standard quantum mechanics rules.
Like what kind of properties?
Things like the total energy, electric dipole, and quadrupole moments, which tell you about charge distribution, atomic charges, bond orders.
But it doesn't stop there.
Crucially, no. It can also predict excited state properties, like the energy gap, how much energy it takes to excite an electron, and linear response properties like electric polarizability, how easily the electron cloud gets distorted by an electric field.
Wow, so it learns the underlying structure so well it can predict lots of different things.
That's multitask learning in action. Instead of learning each property separately, it learns the fundamental electronic structure profoundly. This shared representation boosts its generalization capability.
Meaning it's good at predicting things for molecules it hasn't seen before.
Exactly. And its data efficiency. It learns more from less training data because it's learning the underlying rules, not just memorizing answers.
Okay, that makes sense.
It's a much smarter way to learn.
So how did they teach this super smart EGNN? You need data, right? Good data, that gold standard data.
Absolutely. Rigorous, high-quality training data was essential.
And the characters in their training set, the molecules they started with, were hydrocarbons.
Yes, hydrocarbon organic molecules, things made of just carbon and hydrogen. They're common, structurally diverse, so they make an excellent testbed for a new method.
Makes sense. So how did they generate this gold standard data? It sounds like a lot of work.
It was meticulous work, as outlined in their Figure 1c. First, they picked 85 different hydrocarbon structures from the PubChem database, a huge chemical library.
Okay.
Then, and this is clever, they didn't just use the perfect static structure for each molecule. They ran molecular dynamics, MD simulations,
Why do that?
because molecules in the real world aren't static. They're constantly moving, jiggling, bending, stretching. MD simulations let them sample an ensemble of atomic configurations, capturing the molecules in various realistic poses and contortions.
So the model learns from real-world fuzziness, not just perfect textbook shapes.
Precisely. You want the model trained on realistic scenarios. And then, for each of these sampled, jiggling configurations.
They ran the super expensive calculations.
Yes. They ran the incredibly expensive gold standard CCSD calculations for ground state properties and related EOM CCSD calculations for excited state properties.
It's like taking thousands of perfect high-res photos of molecules in every possible pose.
That's a great way to put it. The result of all that painstaking computational effort was a data set of about 10,500 data points.
Those were the gold labels. The right answer is the EGNN learned from.
Exactly. This extensive, high-quality data set was absolutely fundamental to the model's success in capturing those subtle quantum details.
That really highlights the dedication needed. They weren't just throwing random data at an algorithm.
No, they were carefully crafting the training set from the most accurate, albeit slowest, methods available. That scientific rigor is key.
Okay, now that we understand how they built this neural network of molecules, let's get to the really exciting part. Why does it matter? What's the impact?
The impact is potentially huge. The most immediate and, frankly, staggering result is the performance, especially speed.
Speed is king, right? Especially in designing things.
Absolutely. Remember, traditional CCSDT scales as n to the 7th. Double the molecule size, 128 times the cost. Just impossible for large systems.
Okay, brace yourselves. What about this new EGNN method?
You ready for this? It scales only linearly with system size, n to the 1st.
N to the 1st. From n to the 7th. That's not just faster, that's a completely different game.
It's like going from a horse and buggy straight to a supersonic jet.
If you look at figure S1b and their supporting information, you see it visually. The EGNN line is way down at the bottom, almost flat. Minimal cost increase for bigger systems.
That's a paradigm shift. Seriously.
Ow.
It unlocks calculations that were just impossible before.
Fundamentally changes what's feasible.
Okay, but speed is one thing. What about accuracy? Did they sacrifice precision for speed?
That's the other amazing part. No, accuracy remains queen. The EGNN achieves remarkable precision.
How precise?
It actually outperforms DFT with the widely used hybrid and double hybrid functionals on most properties. So it's better than the old workhorse.
And its error for energy, the RMSE, is about 0.1 kilocalma per atom.
Is that good?
That's considered chemical accuracy. That's the level of precision you need for practical applications, like designing drugs where tiny energy differences matter hugely.
Wow. Okay, so gold standard accuracy, nearly.
It's getting very close and much, much faster. It even approaches the accuracy of other advanced ML potentials like AIQM1.
And it's not just energy, right? You mentioned other properties.
Critically, yes. It also gives highly accurate predictions for those excited state properties, like the energy gap, and linear response properties, like polarizability.
Which are needed for things like solar cells, LEDs.
Exactly. Understanding how molecules interact with light, it's vital for optoelectronics, photochemistry, many fields.
And beyond speed and accuracy, there's this generalization power. What does that mean?
It means the model isn't just good at the specific small hydrocarbons it was trained on, it shows robust generalization capability.
So it can handle bigger, different molecules?
Yes. It works well going from the small molecules in the training set under 100 atomic mass units to much larger molecules and even semiconducting polymers with weights up into the thousands.
That is huge. It means it can tackle complex systems that, as the researchers say, CCSDT just cannot be implemented on current computational platforms.
It's solving previously unsolvable problems with high accuracy.
And it learns efficiently, too. You mentioned data efficiency.
Right. The error drops nicely as you give it more training data, with a slope indicating outstanding data efficiency. better than other advanced ML potentials.
And that's because of the multitask learning the underlying physics.
Exactly. Because it's learning the fundamental electronic structure, it gets more bang for its buck from the training data. It's like learning the grammar lets you understand infinite sentences.
Okay, the real-world applications. Let's see this thing in action, case studies.
Let's do it. First up, aromatic molecules.
Those ring-shaped molecules that are everywhere, plastics, medicines, dyes.
Exactly. A big challenge is accurately predicting their standard enthalpy of formation, HF. That's key for chemical engineering, knowing how much energy is involved in making them.
And predicting that accurately has been hard.
Especially for larger, complex aromatics, often require difficult experiments or less accurate approximations.
So how did the EGNN do?
They tested it on 11 different aromatic molecules, including some really complex ones. The predictions for HF were well consistent with experiments. Differences were tiny, only around 0.1 to 0.2 kcal per atom.
Which is basically within the experimental error.
Pretty much, yeah. On the same order of magnitude as the experimental error bar. Figure 3a shows this great agreement. It highlights its practical predictive power right now.
Amazing. Okay, next case. Infrared IR spectrum, the molecular fingerprint.
Right. IR tells you how molecules vibrate when hit with infrared light. The pattern reveals structure, functional groups.
But you said ML models struggled with predicting the intensity of the peaks, not just where they are.
That's been a challenge, yes. Predicting how strongly a molecule absorbs at a specific frequency.
So how did the EGNN handle this? They used benzene as a test.
Yes, benzene is a classic test case.
Yeah.
And the EGNN nailed it. It predicted the correct peak positions, and the peak intensity was well consistent with the experiment.
Even subtle stuff.
Even subtle features like the benzene finger's specific weak bands that are really hard to model accurately.
How did it manage that?
It comes from its ability to accurately predict transition dipole moments, which directly control how strongly light is absorbed.
That's a real breakthrough for understanding spectra. Okay, final case study. Large-scale semiconducting polymers.
These are fascinating. Long chains of organic molecules with small energy gap and high electrical conductivity.
Like the stuff in OLED displays on our phones and TVs.
Exactly that kind of material. Huge interest, both fundamentally and for applications.
But they're challenging to model. Why?
Because their electronic properties involve complex, long-range correlation. The electrons aren't localized. Their orbitals, where they live, can extend through the whole macroscopic molecule.
So an electron way over here can affect something way over there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
These long-range interactions are notoriously difficult for many computational methods, including some ML approaches that focus too much on just the local environment.
But the EGNN.
The EGNN triumphed here. It correctly captures the delocalized pi bond feature of frontier orbitals, like the HOMO and LUMO, the highest occupied and lowest unoccupied molecular orbitals.
And here's the mind-blowing part I read. It did this even though molecular orbitals weren't directly part of the training data.
Isn't that incredible? It shows the EGNN learned a physics-informed representation. It didn't just memorize, it understood these complex electron distributions and their long-range nature just from learning other properties.
You can see this in the pictures, figure 4a, the electron cloud spread out.
Yes, the visualizations clearly show it capturing that delocalization across long chains. It's proof of its deep understanding.
And it worked for really long chains.
Yes, it accurately predicted how key properties like the energy gap, Ag, and static electric polarizability, alpha, changed with chain length for chains up to more than 400 atoms. Scaling to these sizes accurately is a huge deal.
How did the results compare to known values?
Outstandingly well. For trans-polyacetylene, DPA, and polyphenylene, PPP, the energy gap predictions were in reasonable agreement with experimental values. That's figure 4b.
And polarizability.
Figure 4c shows perfect agreement with previous high-accuracy calculations using another method called MP2. So the model's reliability is confirmed for these complex systems.
And it even made new predictions, stuff nobody knew before.
Even more impressively, yes. It provided new predictions for how Ag and alpha change with chain length in cyclic polyacetylene, CPA. These values have not been reported before.
So it's not just confirming things, it's making novel scientific contributions, guiding future experiments.
Absolutely.
Okay.
It demonstrates its ability to push the boundaries and explore uncharted territory in materials science.
Wow. Okay, we've covered so much ground. Let's wrap up with some key takeaways and look ahead.
Sounds good.
First, that scalability marvel. N to the 7th versus N to the 1st.
It bears repeating. It's not just incremental. It's a paradigm shift. Like Abacus's supercomputer for molecular analysis. It fundamentally changes the scope of what chemists can even attempt.
And learning beyond the data, predicting orbitals and IR intensities without being explicitly trained on them.
That's incredibly profound. It proves it's learning the underlying physics, the physics-informed representation, not just curve fitting, capturing long-range effects from local information.
Like understanding grammar lets you form new sentences.
A perfect analogy. It understands the rules of chemistry at a deeper level.
And all this power comes from a network that's relatively small, only about 500,000 parameters.
Which is remarkably efficient compared to some giant AI models in other fields. It shows the power of building scientific knowledge into the architecture.
Okay, so what's next? Where does this go from here?
Well, the current model, as amazing as it is currently limited to hydrocarbon molecules, carbon and hydrogen only.
Right, but the chemical universe is much bigger than that.
Vastly bigger.
Yeah.
So the immediate next step for the researchers is clear. Apply the method to data sets with more elements.
Adding oxygen, nitrogen, metals, everything else.
Exactly. The ultimate goal is to produce a general-purpose electronic structure predictor. One model that could accurately predict properties for any combination of elements.
That would be unbelievable. The potential is staggering.
It really is. It opens up so many new possibilities. What new molecular designs become possible when simulation is this fast and accurate?
How could it speed up discovering materials for climate change, carbon capture?
Or new medicines.
Yeah.
Truly personalized drugs with fewer side effects.
Or new renewable energy tech, better solar cells, catalysts.
The bottleneck in molecular discovery, that computational wall, has just been significantly lowered, maybe even broken through in some areas.
This deep dive really shows it, doesn't it? Combining machine learning's power with deep physics understanding. We're not just speeding things up.
We're giving machines the ability to truly understand the intricate language of molecules.
So the final provocative thought. What incredible, maybe unimaginable conversations will this neural network of molecules spark in the future of chemistry, materials, medicine, maybe everything?
It's an exciting time to be watching this space.
Keep those chemical curiosities bubbling, everyone, because the molecular frontier just got a whole lot more exciting.